Right now, somewhere in a museum, a weathered skull sits silently behind a sheet of glass. Millions of people walk past it every year without realizing they are looking at one of humanity's greatest mysteries. This skull did not belong to a Neanderthal, and it did not belong to one of us. It belonged to Homo erectus, a human species that survived on Earth for nearly 2 million years, longer than any other human relative we have ever discovered. They crossed continents before maps existed, mastered landscapes that changed beyond recognition, and lived through ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and dramatic climate shifts. They were not weak. They were not primitive in the way many people imagine. They were survivors on a scale almost impossible to comprehend. Then, almost without warning, they disappeared. The question that continues to challenge archaeologists is simple, but deeply unsettling. What happened to them? Did changing climate slowly erase their world? Did shrinking populations make survival impossible? Or did the arrival of our own species change history forever? By the end of this documentary, you will understand what scientists know, what they still debate, and why the extinction of Homo erectus remains one of the most fascinating mysteries in human evolution. To understand their disappearance, we first need to understand who they really were. Homo erectus first appeared in Africa nearly 2 million years ago, long before modern civilization, long before written language, and long before anyone could record their story. Unlike earlier human ancestors, they had bodies surprisingly similar to ours. They stood upright, walked efficiently, across enormous distances, and possessed longer legs that allowed them to travel farther than previous human species. Their brains were smaller than ours, but significantly larger than those of their ancestors, suggesting increasing intelligence and more sophisticated behavior. They shaped stone into carefully crafted hand axes, some so symmetrical that archaeologists still admire the skill required to produce them. These tools were not random rocks. They represented planning, precision, and knowledge passed from one generation to another. Evidence from several archaeological sites also suggests that Homo erectus learned to control fire. If that interpretation is correct, fire transformed everything. It provided warmth during cold nights, protection against dangerous predators, light after sunset, and perhaps even cooked food that delivered more energy to support growing brains. Imagine standing beside a campfire almost 1 million years ago, watching flames dance across the faces of people who looked strangely familiar, yet belonged to a completely different human species. The distance between them and us suddenly feels much smaller. Homo erectus did not remain confined to Africa. They became the first known human species to spread across vast regions of Eurasia, reaching what are now Georgia, China, Indonesia, and many places in between. Every migration demanded extraordinary endurance. There were no roads, no permanent shelters, no stored food supplies, and no certainty about what lay beyond the next valley. Every step forward carried enormous risk. Yet they continued moving into unfamiliar landscapes. That success alone tells us something important. Homo erectus was not simply surviving. For hundreds of thousands of generations, they were thriving. Their story should have continued indefinitely. Instead, the fossil record begins to grow strangely quiet. Some populations disappear completely. Others leave only scattered traces. Then the evidence fades almost entirely. Here's the strange part. There is no single dramatic moment marking their end. No massive battlefield filled with skeletons. No unmistakable sign of one catastrophic disaster. Instead, their disappearance unfolds like the final pages of a book that have been torn away. Scientists are left trying to reconstruct the ending from only a handful of surviving clues. Among the most important discoveries are fossils from the Indonesian island of Java, where some of the youngest known Homo erectus remains have been found. Dating these fossils is extremely difficult, and researchers continue to debate exactly when these populations disappeared. Some studies suggest they survived much later than previously believed, raising an intriguing possibility. During the final chapters of Homo erectus history, Another human species was expanding across the world. That species was us. The possibility sounds dramatic, but archaeology demands caution. There is currently no confirmed evidence proving that Homo sapiens deliberately hunted or wiped out Homo erectus. Yet the timing is intriguing enough that scientists continue asking the question. Across history, whenever two closely related species occupy similar environments, competition often follows. They may compete for food, fresh water, shelter, hunting territory, or safe places to raise their young. Even without violence, one group can gradually replace another simply by adapting more efficiently to changing conditions. Modern humans possessed several advantages that may have made an enormous difference. Our brains were larger, allowing more complex planning and communication. We likely developed richer languages capable of sharing detailed information across generations. Better cooperation meant better hunting strategies, stronger social bonds, and faster innovation. A single invention could spread through an entire community instead of disappearing with one individual. Imagine two groups walking through the same valley thousands of years apart. One relies on techniques that change slowly over hundreds of generations. The other constantly experiments, improves, and teaches every new discovery to its children. Over centuries, that difference becomes enormous. Here's the part that surprises many people. Extinction does not always happen through dramatic battles. Sometimes it happens quietly. A smaller population loses access to the best hunting grounds. Food becomes less predictable. Young families become fewer. Birth rates slowly decline while deaths increase. Generation after generation, the population shrinks until one day there are simply too few individuals left to recover. No single disaster is responsible. Instead, dozens of small disadvantages combine into one irreversible outcome. Climate may have accelerated that process. During the final period of Homo erectus, the Earth experienced repeated environmental changes. Forests expanded, then disappeared. Rivers shifted course. Grasslands became dense woodland before opening once again. Animals migrated with the changing seasons, forcing human groups to adapt or move. A species that had survived countless environmental challenges suddenly faced rapidly changing ecosystems, while another highly adaptable human species was spreading into neighboring regions. That combination may have created pressures unlike anything Homo erectus had experienced before. Some researchers believe isolated populations became trapped as suitable habitats grew smaller and more fragmented. Once separated, these groups would have struggled to exchange knowledge, find mates, or recover after disease, accidents, or harsh seasons reduced their numbers. Small populations are surprisingly fragile. They can survive for centuries, then vanish within only a few generations. Turns out, nature does not always need a giant catastrophe to erase a species. Sometimes simple mathematics is enough. Every year, a few fewer births. Every decade, a little less genetic diversity. Every century, a slightly smaller territory. Eventually, the balance tips beyond recovery. There is another fascinating possibility that scientists continue investigating. What if Homo sapiens and Homo erectus rarely met at all? Because fossils are incredibly rare and ancient landscapes have changed dramatically, it is possible that the two species occupied different regions for much of their existence. Some researchers argue that by the time modern humans reached parts of Southeast Asia, the last Homo erectus populations may already have been disappearing due to environmental pressures. Others suggest there could have been brief periods of overlap, but not enough evidence has been discovered to determine what those encounters looked like. Were they peaceful? Were they competitive? Did they simply avoid one another? At the moment, nobody can answer with certainty. That uncertainty is one of the most honest and exciting parts of archaeology. Every new fossil, every improved dating technique, and every ancient landscape reconstructed through modern science has the potential to rewrite what we think we know. History is not carved in stone. It is reconstructed from fragments, and sometimes a single fragment changes the entire story. What makes this mystery so powerful is that it forces us to accept something uncomfortable. We like history to have clear heroes, clear villains, and clear endings. But the story of Homo erectus offers none of those. The most honest answer scientists can give today is that we simply do not know exactly why they disappeared. It may have been climate change. It may have been shrinking populations. It may have been competition with other human species.